The wind howled against the rusted iron blast doors of Site 9. Mercer adjusted his night vision goggles, the green tint illuminating the snow. "Cut the seal!" ordered Captain Vance, his voice crackling over the radio. Sparks flew as the thermal cutter bit into the cold steel. With a groan of dying metal, the heavy doors swung inward. A stale, ancient smell of copper and rot drifted out. The darkness inside seemed thicker than natural night. Mercer stepped in first, his rifle raised. "Lamps on," Vance commanded. 4 beams of light cut through the gloom of the entry hall. Dust motes danced in the light, undisturbed for 50 years. "Readings are weird," said Cale, staring at his scanner. "Radiation?" asked Sarah, the medic. "No," Cale whispered. "Biological heat. Massive amounts." They walked past the empty guard booth. Glass shattered outward. Strange. Black residue coated the floor like dried tar. Mercer knelt and touched it. It was sticky. "Don't touch anything," Vance snapped. They reached the freight elevator. The cables were snapped, coiled like dead snakes at the bottom. "We'd take the stairs," Vance said, pointing to the emergency shaft. The descent was long, the metal stairs vibrating with their steps. Level 5. Research labs. The door was welded shut from the outside. "Someone really didn't want this opening," Sarah noted. Cale placed a charge on the hinges. The explosion was deafening in the tight space. The door fell, revealing a long, hospital-like corridor. Papers were scattered everywhere, yellowed with age. A skeleton sat in a chair, still wearing a lab coat. The skull was missing. Not removed, but crushed. Mercer shined his light on the wall behind the chair. A message was scratched into the concrete in Russian. "Can anyone read this?" Mercer asked. Sarah stepped closer. "It says, 'They hear your heartbeat.'" A sudden metallic clank echoed from deep down the hall. Everyone froze, weapons raised. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. "Just a settling pipe," Vance muttered, trying to convince himself. They moved forward, boots crunching on broken glass. They passed a containment cell with a shattered observation window. Inside, the walls were covered in deep, gouged claw marks. The marks were too wide for a bear, too precise for a machine. "Look at the ceiling," Kel whispered, voice trembling. Above them, a vent cover was torn open, twisted like paper. A single drop of thick, viscous liquid fell onto Cale's shoulder. He wiped it. It was red. Fresh blood. "Contact," Mercer lied, spinning around. Something moved in the shadows of the ceiling pipes. It was fast, too fast for the human eye. "Defensive formation. Vance, Rojared." Cale aimed his scanner up. "It's right above us." A low, clicking sound filled the corridor. It sounded like wet bones snapping together. From the darkness, a shape it had no skin, just raw, red muscle and exposed sinew. It had noise, only a mouth filled with needle teeth. The creature let out a shriek that pierced their eardrums. Cale fired. The muzzle flash lit up the horror. The bullets hit, but the creature didn't fall. It leaped, covering 20 feet in a second. It landed on Cale, pinning him to the ground. Cale screamed as the creature's claws tore through his vest. Blood sprayed across the white walls. Mercer and Vance opened fire, shredding the creature's torso. It convulsed and collapsed on top of Cale. Cale was gasping, blood bubbling from his mouth. "Get it off him!" Sarah cried, rushing forward. They shoved the heavy carcass aside. Cale's chest was a ruin. He wasn't going to make it. "Leave me," Cale choked out. "Save your breath," Vance said, applying pressure. The clicking sound started again, not from one direction, but from everywhere. From the vents, from the floor grates, from behind the walls. Cale's scanner beeped rapidly, a solid wall of red dots. "How many?" Mercer asked. "Reloading." "Hundreds," Cale whispered, eyes glazing over. The lights in the hallway flickered and died. Only their tactical flashlights remained. In the beams of light, shadows began to detach from the walls, More of the skinless things dropped from the ceiling. They were smaller, but there were so many. Cale pulled the pin on a grenade at his belt. "Run," he said. Vance grabbed Sarah and Mercer. "Move! Now!" They sprinted down the hall, away from the swarm. Behind them, the explosion shook the foundation. The heat of the blast licked their backs. Cale was gone, but the screeching didn't stop. It got louder, angry, hungry. They reached a heavy bulkhead door and spun the wheel. As they slipped through, a claw jammed into the gap. Mercer slammed the door shut, severing the limb. The severed claw on the floor twitched, even though it was dead. Sarah vomited in the corner, shaking violently. Vance locked the wheel, his breathing ragged. "We need a plan," Mercer said, checking his ammo. "We have 300 rounds left." Thuds impacted the door behind them. Heavy, rhythmic. They're testing the door, Vance realized. "They're intelligent. We need to get to the generator," Mercer said. "Power up the main elevator." "That's 3 levels down," Sarah said, wiping her mouth. "The vents are compromised. We used the maintenance tunnels," Vance decided. They moved deeper into Sector 6. The air here was humid, smelling of sulfur and copper. The floor was covered in a strange, organic webbing. "It looks like a nest," Sarah whispered. They entered a large warehouse filled with crates. Flashlights swept the room. In the center, a pile of bones reached waist height. Human bones. Thousands of them. "This was a feeding ground," Mercer said. A soft hiss came from behind a stack of crates. Vance signaled for silence. A creature crawled out. This one was different. It was larger, with bone plates growing over its muscle. An alpha. It didn't see them. It was sniffing the air. Sarah stepped back, her boot clicking on a loose tile. The alpha's head snapped toward them. It didn't scream. It chattered, a low, guttural sound. From the shadows, 10 more creatures emerged. "Fire at will," Vance yelled. The room erupted in gunfire. The alpha charged, shrugging off bullets like rain. Mercer aimed for the head, blowing off part of its jaw. It didn't stop. It rammed into Vance, sending him flying. Vance hit a crate, ribs cracking audibly. Sarah sprayed submachine gun fire into the pack. 2 smaller ones fell, thrashing in black blood. The alpha turned its attention to Sarah. Mercer drew his combat knife and jumped on the alpha's back. He stabbed the creature in the neck, burying the blade. The monster thrashed, throwing Mercer off. Vance recovered, grabbing a flare gun from his belt. The creature screeched as it burned from the inside out. The other monsters retreated from the blinding light. "Go while they're blinded," Vance ordered. They ran through the warehouse maze. Vance was limping badly, clutching his side. They found a maintenance hatch in the floor. Mercer pulled it open. "Ladder, go down." Sarah went first, then Vance. Mercer fired a few last shots to keep the pack back. He slid down the ladder and slammed the hatch. Above them, the creatures began tearing at the metal. They were in a narrow service tunnel. Pipes leaked steam, scalding their skin. "Vance, let me see your side," Sarah said. Vance lifted his shirt. The skin was purple and black. "Internal bleeding," Sarah diagnosed grimly. "I can walk," Vance lied. They crawled through the tunnel for 20 minutes. The heat was unbearable. Suddenly, the tunnel shook. Something was digging through the earth towards them. "They are in the walls," Mercer shouted. A claw punched through the thin metal of the tunnel wall. It grabbed Sarah's ankle. She screamed as she was dragged down. Mercer lunhed, grabbing her hand. "Don't let go," he gritted his teeth. Vance smashed the claw with the butt of his rifle. The creature let go, retreating into the dirt. Sarah sobbed, her ankle bleeding profusely. "We can't stop," Vance said, helping her up. They saw light at the end of the tunnel. They burst out into the generator room. It was a massive cavern, lit by emergency red lights. In the center, the turbines stood silent. But the room wasn't empty. Hanging from the ceiling were cocoons, human-sized cocoons made of the sticky webbing. Some of them were twitching. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "They aren't just eating us, they're breeding," Mercer realized. Vance moved to the control console. "I need 2 minutes to bypass the lockdown." "You don't have 2 minutes," Mercer said, looking at the entrances. Hundreds of glowing eyes appeared in the dark doorways. The Horde had found them. "Hold them back," Vance yelled, typing furiously. Mercer and Sarah took positions behind the turbines. The wave of monsters poured into the room. It was a tide of red muscle and teeth. Mercer fired until his barrel smoked. Click. Empty. He drew his pistol. "Come on, you ugly bastards." The generator turbines groaned to life with a deafening whine. Lights flickered on, blindingly bright white. The sudden light stunned the creatures momentarily. "Elevator is active," Vance shouted over the roar. A massive creature, bigger than the Alpha, dropped from the ceiling. The Queen. She was 15 feet tall, with 4 arms and armored plating. She swiped at the control console, crushing a tan Vance. Vance didn't even have time to scream. He was gone. "Vance," Sarah screamed. "Mercer grabbed Sarah! He's dead! Move!" They ran toward the heavy freight elevator at the back of the room. The Queen let out a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. She charged, knocking turbines aside like toys. Mercer hit the call button. The gears ground slowly. Too slowly. The Horde recovered and resumed the attack. Mercer threw his last grenade at the Queen's feet. The explosion staggered her, blowing off one of her legs. She dragged herself forward, screeching in hate. The elevator doors dinged and opened. They dove inside. Mercer slammed the close button. The Queen lunged, her head smashing into the closing doors. Her jaws snapped inches from Sarah's face. The metal doors bent under her strength. Mercer fired his pistol point blank into her eye. She recoiled, shrieking. The doors finally sealed shut. The elevator jerked and began to rise. They collapsed on the floor, covered in blood and slime. "We made it," Sarah wept. Mercer didn't speak. He was listening, not to the elevator, but to the shaft outside. Scrabbling sounds. They were climbing the cables. "They're coming up the shaft," Mercer said calmly. He looked at the floor indicator. Level 4. Level 3. Dot. Dot. Bam. Something hit the roof of the elevator. Then another hit. And another. The metal ceiling began to buckle downward. Claws punctured the roof, swiping blindly. Mercer looked at Sarah. "The roof hatch." "What?" she asked, eyes wide. "If they breach the roof, we're dead. We have to fight them on top." "Are you crazy?" "We're close to the surface. Site 9 has a blast hatch at the top." Mercer boosted Sarah through the emergency trap door. They stood on top of the moving elevator car. The shaft was alive with monsters crawling on the walls. Mercer kicked a creature off the cables, sending it falling into the dark. The elevator passed level 1. Daylight leaked from the grate far above. The elevator stopped abruptly. Jammed. Mercer yelled. They were 20 feet below the surface. Great. A maintenance ladder ran along the wall. "Climb!" Mercer ordered. Sarah scrambled up the rusty rungs. A creature leaped from the wall, latching onto Mercer's back. Mercer grunted, feeling claws dig into his shoulders. He slammed his back against the wall, crushing the creature. He followed Sarah, adrenaline masking his pain. Below them, the elevator roof gave way. Dozens of monsters poured into the empty car. Seeing it empty, Tay looked up. A chorus of shrieks filled the shaft. They began to climb the ladder. A wave of death. Sarah reached the top grate. It was locked. "It won't open," she cried in panic. Mercer reached her, looked down. The Horde was 10 feet away. He pulled a stick of C4 from his vesicle's last gift. "Cover your head," Mercer said. He jammed the explosive into the grate's lock. Boom. The grate flew open, twisting into the snowy air. Sarah climbed out into the blinding white snow. She reached down to pull Mercer up. A claw grabbed Mercer's boot. He looked down into the maw of a monster. He looked at Sarah. "Go," he said softly. He let go of the ladder. "No!" Sarah screamed. Mercer fell, taking the lead monster with him. He plummeted into the mass of creatures below. Sarah scrambled back from the hole as monsters tried to follow. She grabbed a nearby fuel drum and tipped it into the shaft. She lit a flare and dropped it. A massive pillar of fire erupted from the hole. The screams from below were terrible, then silent. Sarah lay in the snow, the cold air burning her lungs. She looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, but in the distance, she saw smoke rising from the city. And she heard it. The clicking sound. They weren't just here. They were everywhere.